We have a reception at the end of the afternoon, and I'm assured that there's free beer, there's free wine, so we can have a few drinks, have a chat, Right, we seem to have lost about half the audience.
That's fine by me. If the other half want to go.
Because I would imagine there's going to be a kind of a stream of people coming in throughout. Are you staying or leaving? You're trying to go? Okay. Okay, we really need to get going. So, I'd like to introduce Aaron Langley. Aaron was here at Brains Eden a couple of years back, and he was, in fact, one of the Brains Eden winners. So, yeah, obviously a star in the making. He has subsequently gone on and he has his own company, Ludophobia, which is doing amazingly well. Turning into a mega corp as we speak,
yeah,
and he can tell you more about it. Here he is.
I'll stick to that if that's all right. This is my presentation, making games for other people, which isn't as good as making games for yourself, but what are you going to do? Like I said, my name's Aaron Langley. First, a little bit about myself. So, presentation, go, yeah. I am graduating this year at Southampton Solent University. Third year project, I made a game called Attack the Horde. That did okay. Yeah, but what are you going to do? As an artist, I have created a few little portfolio pieces, and most importantly, set up a company called Ludophobia with my friend Adrian, who does the coding side. And we take a slightly different approach to a normal game design company. What we do is we market ourselves, we say we are, specialists in bespoke media design. So what we do is we go to a company and take, say, like a boring training video. Most of you people here, I think. And what we do is we make it fun through gamification, turn it into a gaming experience where they're learning those same principles, but through a game. Back to that slide. Yeah, and as you can see, the services that we offer on the right there. So, app gaming, training, education, architectural visualization, just these different things, and we take the profits that we make from these client projects, and we use them to fund our own little games, which we then release out to the public. Yeah, cool. So what I'm first going to do is explain our client, how we got my first client, and our client process, and the process of that. Sorry, and then gives you a few tips on dealing with clients. This is something that you would like to do. So our first client was Kraft Foods, or Cadbury's, which was great because we got a load of free chocolate. And yeah, so how did I meet Kraft? Went to a conference, which is so obviously just trying to network, trying to meet different people, and they were looking at store visualization fly-throughs. And I went up to one of them and went, why don't you try thinking about this in maybe a gaming sense? You could train your staff through a game instead of them watching a video on where they should be putting point-of-sale displays, and they could play it instead. And then they'd learn through, those important messages. And they went, no, go away. you're irritating me now. So I went away to my hotel room, got out my laptop, opened up UDK, and I built them a visualization store, which they could run around in, see what they thought. And I brought it down to them the next day, showed it to them, and 3 weeks later, I was working on a game with them, paid. So that worked out pretty well. Yeah, so that's how we got our client. But what was the actual project like? Let's go to the next slide. So first we looked at what did the client want, which was our big thing. So, we talked to them, got an idea of what they wanted, what they needed, and we got a short list of what we actually wanted from that. So I've got them here. So, something easy to play, new way of training their sales team. Naturally, sales teams are really competitive people because obviously the work that they do is quite competitive naturally. So creating games where you have like a high score thing works really well for them because they want to beat each other at it straight away, and they don't even realize that they're learning where they should be putting these point of sale displays. So yeah, once we got our list down, we developed a prototype, which is that. That's what I actually gave them, still with the blue and white squares in UDK. But they didn't know that, so that was fine. Yeah, and they could run around it, try it out, see the basic gameplay mechanics, so that they're getting something which is tailored exactly for them, so that they can see it perfectly. Okay, so then we go. In some other cases, we would develop multiple prototypes, develop multiple ideas with them, in case they were kind of a bit, unsure on how they wanted to do it, unsure on, kind of what they wanted to teach in the first place. So, developing a few little ideas really quickly, with a very fast turnover, which might make, a 48-hour gaming festival quite useful, because if you can make a game in 48 hours, you can make a prototype in 48 hours, and you can show that to them in 2 days' time, and suddenly they've got something that is, tailored specifically for what they want. And then, we created the design outline, which was basically, a nice big document saying what the game needed to do, what it was going to look like, what the maps were, all the different elements ready and in. And then we start making the actual game, which is a big loop of software development through Sprint and client feedback. So every week we'd be sending the client an update of the game, where they'd be able to give us feedback, input on what they thought, so that we could tailor the game specifically for them. So basically, while we were developing the game, we would be working on the fixes and the things that they wanted to change. So if they didn't like the font, didn't like the character, things like that, we'd be changing it as we were building the game. And then we ended up with a finished game, yay, which last year they unveiled at one of their own conferences. It's now in England and America, and we've just finished off an Arabic version of the game. So yeah, once you've done a game for them, a big company like this, they'll want to, maybe do more things with you, do, expansions, different things like that, and different languages. Okay, so next onto the tips, and I've just realised I haven't been reading any of this, so that's great. Yeah, so are you client focused? That is the main thing. You've got to make sure that you're doing the projects, what you're building, it's specifically for them. Okay, so and be professional. So this doesn't necessarily mean wearing a suit. You just have to, come in, know what you're talking about, be polite, just the basic things that when you're going in, and treat them with respect. Don't mention God of War, maybe, where you ripped a guy's head off and use it as a torch, because unfortunately the games industry still has a massive stigma behind it. They when you say, oh yeah, I make games, they just think, whoops, this guy. Yeah, that's what every single game designer looks like, apparently. So yeah, you've got to basically be professional, not mention games as an actual thing, but talk about it specifically for what they need and what they need. We also just call it interactive media, don't even call it games, because games just scare them a lot of the time. Don't use jargon, at all when you're talking to them. We learned that the hard way, so we'd be saying, oh yeah, we'll just, slap a few normal maps on there, that'll be fine. They'll be like, what the hell's a normal map? And you just think, because, we all talk to each other, we've all got a lot of games experience, a lot of games knowledge, we know exactly what, we're talking about when we use our jargon, but they haven't got a clue, even with just general gaming things. So you've really got to be very specific in what you do, and if you do have to use jargon, make sure you explain it afterwards. And hopefully, if you're lucky, they won't use any of their jargon. Yeah, and also if you're really lucky, like we were, you'll have someone who's who's worked with creative people before, so who understands that we're a bit crazy, and things like that. So next, keep it simple. This is one of the things that we learned, and again the hard way. When we did our game for Craft, we used WSD to move, which is makes sense, right? But when they tried to move around, they couldn't get it because they instantly went for the arrow keys. So yeah, you've got to because they're just thinking logically. They're thinking, okay, I want to move my character left, so I'll use the thing that looks left. So I'll click that one, not A, which is just something that we've been programmed to use. So keep it simple, and you make sure you remember that you're developing for people who might not play games regularly. That really irritates me. It's easy, isn't it? You just push a button and you get like a game, because you've still got this massive just stigma of people thinking that game design and game development is just an extension of gameplay. When you say, oh yeah, I'm a games developer, they just instantly think playing, Call of Duty or whatever, and then, 2 years down the line you come out with a game for some reason. Like they don't see the worth in it, or they don't see the value, or why you're even charging so much in the first place to develop this for them. And you've got to show them and give them a reason why they should be doing it. And our best way for doing that was to just make them a prototype. Whoops, that's a dog. So yeah, develop and prototype. Because like I was saying earlier with Craft, I was telling them, explaining to them, pouring all the love that I have for game design into going, you should be doing this, it's fun, it's great, and people still learn, and they're just doing the dog, that's great. Yeah. So, you make them a prototype, and they instantly can see something that is tailored for them. And they don't see the game, like kind of the gamer side of it anymore. They don't see, Halo or Gears of War. They just see what is actually, it's there for them. And lastly, know what you're talking about. Every single person here has, I'm going to guess, a lot more knowledge than me about general gameplay, gaming, and game development. But what you need to know is, if you're developing for a client, is stuff that's specific for them. And I'm going to give you a few places which I go to for information. The first one, and the best one, yeah, don't be that, is extra credits. These guys know what they're talking about. They're all, industry pros in various aspects, especially James, who's the small animated character on the right. And they basically make a video every week, which is very concise, very informative on various topics within game design. The next one is Mark Zuckerman, I think his name is. Yeah, Gabe Zuckerman, sorry. Got his name wrong. He'd hate me if he was here. And he did a TED Talk recently, which was basically on education and training in games. And he had a huge amount of information on that. So if you watch his video, I think they're on YouTube, and just watch through them and get as much information as you can. He's got some information on Nanth Pai's work on schools, which was done over in America, where a guy basically went into a school and he replaced the entire curriculum with DS games. And like the results were like amazing, what actually happened from that. And lastly, Snack Strong Productions. I'm sure if you've got Xbox 360, you've played one of their free games. They're a company that came from Doritos. And basically, if you look around the internet, they actually have their correlation of sales increases in respect to their into their game releases. So you can see how much more Doritos were bought as soon as their games were released. Which is really useful information and stats to have if you ever wanted to do some advergaming and you were trying to pitch that to a client. And that's it. Thanks.
Aaron is really talking about gamification of everything. It's just basic idea that in the future everything is going to be digital. Everything has to have some sort of interactive component. Everything is going to be a game, which is quite an interesting idea. Have we got some questions for Aaron?
Oh God, I hope not.
What's the most annoying thing about clients?
Oh, God. I hope they'll probably watch what I'm saying in front of the camera if they ever see. I think it depends on the client that you're working with, because we've worked with a few different ones. And generally, it's communication. If they can communicate with you what they want, how they want it, then it's fine. But as soon as they're ignoring what you're saying, so you're sending them updates and then they don't send anything back, and then, when you finish development, they go, oh, why can't we have done this? And we're just like, well, we've been doing this for the last 3 months. Why haven't you said something back then? I think that's probably one of the most irritating things. We had one project recently which literally the guy said, can we stop partway through, can we stop about 3 hours into development for it? And we said, okay, we'll put it on hold, that's fine. And he came back to us about a week later saying, so how's it going? He didn't even bother telling us that he wanted us to start back on the project again. So it's definitely communication.
Okay, thanks. Another question, just here?
I didn't catch all of it, so I didn't know if you looked into it in your slides, but I got a gist from you that you were looking at new technologies and the future is all going to be digital. Have you got any thoughts on augmented reality?
My one recommendation is to go on Extra Credits, because they have a 2-part episode on augmented reality and just general ARGs, and they talk about using gaming in real life, so kind of like collecting chests in real worlds, and how that could potentially be exploited by like a company like Starbucks making a game where, oh yeah, you get 200 points if you go into Starbucks and buy a coffee and things like that. So yeah, that's my one recommendation, because they're going to know a lot more about it than I will.
What was the name of the guy who introduced DS games?
That was Ananth Pai. I'm not sure on the spelling. I think it's Ananth and then Pai. And he's, yeah.
Okay, another question. Do you draw the slides for Extra Credits?
No, I don't. That's Alison, who's part of the Extra Credits team. I was just copying.
Okay, any more? One more.
How do you set a budget on your work, and how do you open up those discussions with potential clients?
How we've done it before is we worked out an hourly rate that we charge them for, and then we'll charge them for other excess stuff as well, and then we'll send them a quote with those hours outlined.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Aaron.
Okay.
So next up on the stand here,
Oh, yeah. Just totally forget you're wearing.
For those of you who don't know, Develop Magazine is the monthly magazine for game developers. If you don't read it, you can read it.
Yeah.
Publication in our industry. It's published by Intent Media, who also publish MCV, which is the Trade Weekly, which you should also read. I mean, there aren't that many game development publications, and if you're going to follow a career in the games industry, for God's sake, read the publications that are vitally important to communicate what is going on. Will?
Thank you. I'll go with the same as these two guys, if everyone can hear me okay. So my talk is called So You Play Games for a Living, and a rough guide to games journalism for curious developers. I understand most of you have already decided you're interested in being game developers, and here I am to talk to you about being a games journalist. But it can certainly be an alternative career path in the industry, or a complementary one to what you're doing, or even one that can kickstart a game development career or kind of inform your game development career. So hopefully it'll be of some use to some of you. The title comes from a question you'll have to get used to being asked if you were to ever be involved in games journalism in any way. It is the assumption that I wish I sit playing games for a living all day. So I'm Will Freeman, editor of Develop Magazine. I also do reviews for The Observer in print and The Guardian online, and I hate this egotistical bit where you talk about what you've done, but also used to be a PR working on Sega titles, so hopefully that gives you some context for what I'm talking about. So journalism can certainly be a great career, and the first point is probably the one that's most relevant to people that are wondering where in game development or the games industry they would like to go, because games journalism, you know, one day, I mean, I've already been at a tool company earlier today, then I might be writing a piece on audio, then I'll be visiting a studio. I spend a lot of time talking to PRs and the people doing marketing. So you really do get an experience of, or not even a cross-section of the industry, just the whole industry, and it's fantastic in informing your perspective of the industry in that regard. It's a really press-friendly industry. I have fellow journalists who maybe work in fashion or cinema or something, cover those kind of topics as a journalist, and you're generally hated. The games industry is an enthusiast industry, and that applies to the games journalists as well. So it's a very nice industry to be a journalist in. Few people certainly hate us, of course. There's a hell of a lot of travel being a games journalist. I had barely left the country until I started working full-time as a games journalist. Now I probably go to another country once a month, once every couple of months. So if you like seeing the world, and it's all right, then journalism is a great way to get to have that opportunity. Meet your heroes, pretty obvious one. You know, I grew up obsessed with games and wanting to be a games journalist, and now many of the people who were once these kind of idols of mine are people I have interviewed or worked with, or have even become part of my social circle. And if you are interested in kind of the credit for your work, I've put your name in tiny lights. You know, it doesn't particularly, it's not part of the appeal for me, but you will get credit for your work and you'll get to see your name out there, which is certainly rewarding for people. But it isn't all fun. You won't get rich being a games journalist. I'm not trying to claim it's awfully paid, and I'm very happy with my lot, and I can certainly get by, but if you're interested in making money, and real proper money, maybe don't go for games journalism. There's some very long hours, but you know, you guys all work in the games industry, are looking to work in the games industry. Across the industry there's long hours, so if you're put off by long hours, then yeah, maybe games isn't for you regardless of whether it's as press or a developer. I was just saying how great the travel is. There's a hell of a lot of time away from home. A couple of months ago I think I was in the country 3 days, and when that's every month, it can kind of get, I don't know, it can kind of get exhausting. So if you're not really up for hitting it and really up for travelling all the time, then maybe you should, you know, it's the opposite of spending a lot of time at home. Your career can peak early. I'm 31, I'm an editor. I'm already having to think about what I would do next beyond an editor, and it can be difficult, but again, I think that's why games journalism as an experience could be useful for developers, because the opportunities, as I'll touch on later, of that journalism brings are manifold. So yeah, your career can peak early, but it opens lots of doors. And you need a thick skin, as I'm sure you do as a developer, and the days of online, as we are now in the days of online commenting and so on, basically, I mean, you could go to The Guardian and type in my name and find my reviews, and there'd be some, yeah, just enjoy reading the comments about what an awful human being I am. So, types of games journalism. Now, I hope this will help those of you with an interest in doing games journalism, but if you're not remotely interested, it's still worth knowing the main types of journalism for when you are approaching the press wanting them to cover your game, because if you can be targeted towards different types of journalism, then you're making a busy journalist's job easier and increasing your chance of coverage. Consumer journalism is national newspapers, Heat magazine, FHM, stuff that is generally for everyone and about broad topics. And it certainly, as a journalist, gets you wider exposure, and that probably brings you more opportunities, perhaps outside of the games industry, but it definitely puts you out there. Specialist would be Edge, Games TM, Official Xbox Magazine, Eurogamer, that kind of thing. And if you're really interested in playing games and reviewing and really being there with kind of AAA and mainstream games, Specialist Press is probably the one for you. Trade or B2B, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say what B2B stands for out loud, but it is business to business. It's part titles like Develop, like MCV, GamesIndustry.biz, Gamma Sutra, Game Developer, and there's a lot more variety in the type of writing you get to do, and you really feel part of the industry community. I love it when visiting GDC, you feel very much part of the industry you're writing about, rather than perhaps the consumer and specialist press who are observing the games industry rather than being part of it. Certainly I've had experience of all four on this list, and the trade and B2B stuff is the stuff I love the most. Freelance, that's the kind of thing you could do as a game developer on the side. You can be an expert freelancer. We'll come to that come to that later, but in short, freelance, there's a possibility of some earning some really decent money out of it if you can get to that tipping point, and there's certainly a huge variety of writing. What you need to like. I mean, I've put the word writing. I'd hope that would be obvious, and I feel like a bit of an idiot putting it there, but at the same time, I've definitely come across quite a lot of games journalists who like games and aren't necessarily really into writing. If you're going to be a full-time games journalist, you've got to be the kind of person who gets annoyed when a shop sign has the apostrophe in the wrong place, or really delight in your own anger at when people muddle up semicolons and colons. You've got to love writing, and you've got to be a bit of a nerd for it. And you've got to love video games of every kind. If you're furiously devoted to one platform or to one genre, that might limit your opportunities as a games developer. You've got to be open-minded to everything, unless perhaps you're a games developer doing a bit of freelance on the side and then maybe having a specialty as a strength. Hard work, again, we're all in the games industry or about to be in the games industry, so hard work is no way exclusive to games journalism, but it's certainly part of games journalism. I've said it a couple of times, but the travel, the socialising, the networking, not only kind of in the daytime, but in the evening, there's always press events, there's always a constant networking thing going on. You really have got to, I was about to say, be able to bear people, which probably is reflective of my perspective, but you've really got to be able to enjoy being out there amongst people. And again, as with the rest of the games industry, irregular hours, weekends, travelling, all that kind of thing. But, I adore regular hours. I couldn't buy the idea of the same hours every day. So, how do you become a games journalist or a developer who does a bit of journalism on the side? It's probably harder than ever now. The blog exists. It didn't even 7 or 8 years ago when I started full-time. Blogs weren't the thing they are now. So the line that divides professional journalist with blogger is becoming more and more of a blurred line. Everyone can express their opinions through words online. So standing out from that is tough. But I would suggest starting a blog if you want to become a games journalist, because it gives you an opportunity to tighten up your writing style, gain experience, learn your writing voice, which is the most important thing you can do as a games journalist. But I also sadly would advise you have to work for free for a while. Write for anyone you can, write for various publications, it doesn't matter what it is, but get some stuff published. But be prepared to draw a line, because believe me, you could go on forever writing for free. And fortunately, games journalism, or journalism in general, is not as bad as some industries in how long you have to work unpaid. But be prepared to do a bit and get some work experience under your belt. I mean, it's an obvious one, but our magazine has perhaps employed, or Develop and MCV together have employed 3 people who've previously been work experience people. It gets you experience, it gets you a taste of seeing if you like it, and it gets you contacts. So you just really need to get, my first work experience was for the Brighton Argus, a regional paper, writing a games piece, and, it's part of the reason I'm here now. Journalism qualifications are certainly optional. I'd say it's about a 50-50 split between myself and my colleagues in terms of whether we've had journalism qualifications or not, but it doesn't matter. Don't be put off by not having a journalism qualification or much experience, because again, if you were going to be this developer who makes a bit of cash on the side writing an article about games audio, then it's your experience of the topic that's important, not your experience as a journalist. And being a PR, so the people, a lot of game companies will have a PR who will help me. They'll be my point of contact when I'm writing about a game and need to get some information about a game or game company. Typically, journalists become PRs because PR's a lot better paid, but idiots might, like me, start off in PR because it's relatively easy to get a job in PR based just on your enthusiasm of games. When I went to my first interview as a PR, I didn't know what PR stood for, and I got the job. So, and then my job was phoning journalists all day, and when I decided I despised PR, I left with a list of journalists that I'd been contacting all day, and thus perfect foundation for a freelance career. Considering freelance can be far better paid, but to get to that tipping point where you start to earn a lot of money is tough. There's only a few games freelancers who are big names, and those guys, I don't want to, you know, again, it's not going to make you rich, but it can make you more than being what I am, which is mostly a staff writer, someone going to the desk every day. Well, when I get there occasionally. But yeah, so it can be harder to establish yourself, but you do get a freedom, a kind of personal freedom and a variety of writing. The downside's like any freelance, no holiday days, no sick pay, but as I've mentioned a few times, you can juggle it with being a developer. We have a couple of developers who are regular contributors to our magazine, and their day job is being a game developer, but they contribute to our magazine and several others as experts on a topic, and it's a nice way of them making a bit of extra cash. They're constantly making contacts, they're constantly putting their company in the spotlight. I mean, Will Luton of Mobile Pie Games now does a column for Develop, so he gets a page of editorial for Develop every single issue, and the exposure for his company is fantastic. So maybe being a developer who does a bit of freelance can be good for your studio. You'll have to spend a lot of time on your own being a freelancer. Sadly, it does happen. The stereotypes about sitting indoors, barely having got dressed, writing all day, realising you haven't turned the lights on when it's 6 p.m. and you need to turn the lights on it. Some people don't enjoy how much time you spend on your own as a freelancer. Time is ticking, so I'm going to race through this, but to do well at freelance, recycling your articles is a really important point. If I do an interview with a developer as a freelancer, maybe I could pitch it to a trade publication like Develop, maybe I could angle it a different way for the Observer, and maybe I could write it a different way for a kids magazine. If you're a freelancer, sending your articles to everyone you can is all important. Never turning your nose up is also important. I know a freelancer who used to, I don't know if he still does, make £200 a month from the Dog of the Week page in a magazine about dogs, which was where readers were meant to send in pictures of dogs, their dogs, and get a £200 prize. He saw that as a freelance opportunity and contacted them and said, if I send you a photo of a dog every month, can I have £200 regularly? It'll be easier for you. They said yes. I'd love to be paid £200. He did write a few lines of dialogue with it in the voice of the owner of the dog, but I mean, I'm not suggesting that taking pictures of dogs will help your career as a developer, but not turning your nose up at the places you write is a good way to establish yourself as a freelancer. Never lay all your cards on the table. If you're an editor of a magazine and I'm pitching my idea to you, I need to say, I've got this interview done, I've got these facts, I've got these contacts, I've got these images. I don't want to give you them, because then, if you're an unscrupulous type, you could say, thanks very much, no, I won't pay you for that, I'll use it all. So be careful when approaching people as a freelancer. Just say what you've got, don't give them what you've got. Specialise is important, especially if you were going to be a game developer doing this bit of freelance on the side I keep waffling on about. We have a guy that always does our audio stuff who happens to be a game sound guy. Specialising has been his strength, and he's written all over the place about game audio, even for film magazines who are doing a piece on maybe what can be learnt from the games industry, that kind of thing. But then, at the same time, I've always been told never specialise, because the second you specialise, you're cutting off other potential revenues. So it depends. If you're going to be a full-time freelancer, I'd say don't specialise too much. I've written about nothing but games for 8 years. I imagine I'll probably be writing about nothing apart from games for a while. But if you were going to do it as an aside, as a complement to your job as a developer, then maybe specialising is great, because I'm editor of Develop magazine. If you come to me and say, I do this for my day job and I want to write about it, I'm going to listen a great deal more than if you each week contact me with something totally different. The future for journalists. As I said, your career can peak early as a journalist, but the doors it opens are fantastic. Consultancy work, so working with a game developer, I've done that a few times and it's really exciting. It's a really nice way to be a kind of freelance expert involved in a game. It's fantastic. You can do broadcast. I'm not exactly supremely confident at it, but TV and radio can become a way of earning money and establishing yourself in a different way. I mean, Charlie Brooker, he wrote for Dreamcast magazine for a while, and that's where it all started for him. Talking at conferences, hopefully me standing here is evidence that being a journalist can afford you the opportunity to talk to people sat in rooms listening to you, and when you climb the ladder and start to do it at GDC, the doors it can open for you are fantastic. Moving into games development, when I started at Develop magazine, our then deputy editor was there for maybe 6 months to a year while I was there, and then moved on and became an assistant producer, and is now a producer, I believe, at Mediatonic. So he used games journalism to get himself a career as a games developer. Or, as I mentioned before, if you're interested in the old money, then journalism can afford you a move into PR. Now then, I'm assuming a lot of you aren't remotely interested in being games journalists, because you're already trying to be game developers and you've been listening to me talk about how you should become a games journalist. But I'm now going to attempt in 1 or 2 slides and about 30 seconds to digest a talk I did a few months ago about how startup studios, indies, micro studios, small studios can get coverage in the papers and the press and the magazines and online when you're potentially competing with EA's multi-million-pound marketing budget. So let's see how well this works in a minute. My main thing here is about being part of the community of the games industry. The games journalists and game developers are talking together all the time, and although before I had any sense about me, I used to despise Twitter and think it was for idiots, it's been a fantastic part of my career now. I've more than embraced it. And there was a constant conversation on Twitter between games press, PRs, journalists, games press and journalists, games developers, tools companies, and becoming a natural part of that conversation is how you stand out when it's time for you to ask a journalist for coverage. Because I get, and I wish this was an exaggeration, but I get between 20 and 200 press releases a day. I mean, the 200 mark would be during GDC and E3 and stuff. And I probably get offered several features a day and several interviews a day, and I've got to fit them into one magazine. So obviously I can't afford to listen to everybody. But when it is someone that I recognise as someone who's always there on Twitter, at events, much like this one, so you're already doing partly the right thing, and any other free events you can get to, then being part of that community and being one of the faces that's always there, even if you've never released a game or a high-profile game, being one of those faces means when I see your press release pop up in my inbox with the hundreds of others, I'm going to be more attracted to it, I'm going to be more keen to write about it. And I'm talking about Twitter. You don't have to be always on there being corporate and being professional. I'm going on to my second point here. Just be yourself, be excited about what excites you, be enthusiastic. I mean, I spend most of my time on Twitter talking about collecting dancehall records, arcade PCBs, and probably skate shoes, to be honest. Quite dull topics and nothing to do with the games industry, really. But some of the people, I mentioned that Will Luton from Mobile Pie, who's been fantastic at spreading his profile. It was a conversation about arcade machine parts that got us two talking, and now he's got a regular column in Develop. His profile has increased. He writes all over the place. He's writing a book. So don't be big or corporate or try and be glossy like EA. Just be yourself, have some personality, get your face at events in front of journalists like me, and get yourselves on Twitter and just talk to me, talk to everyone, be part of that conversation, and be targeted, make a journalist's job easy. That goes back to those 4 main types of journalists there are, and perhaps tailoring your contact with each one differently, considering what that journalist wants from you. Journalists are busy, and if you can do us lazy journalists a bit of our job by providing all the information we need to write a story or a feature. So when you send me a press release, with all the main information there, some quotes, a photo of the person that gave the quotes, a load of images. If there's 2 equally worthy stories and one has all that and one is just some information, then I'm going to gravitate towards the one where everything's done for me. Now, I could talk for another hour on how small studios can get the attention of the press and get coverage. I don't have time, but please do come up to me afterwards, or grab my card. I've got a pocket full of them, and I'm more than prepared to talk about it again, because personally and professionally for Develop and The Observer and Guardian, I think small studios and student studios and stuff deserve just as much recognition as the big fish. So, I said hassle me, there are my details. Email address, I've got a separate one for freelance, and you can hear me talk about arcade PCBs on Twitter with that one. And yeah, I'll leave them up there for a bit, and I guess it's questions time.
Brilliant, okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well,
that's okay.
Thank you. We do have some time for a couple of questions. We'll make the time. But there is a little story that I would called upon Will to recount, because whilst everybody is sort of keen to sort of get his ear, there are different people do that in different ways. And if you're the CEO of Jagex, then it might have something to do with a tank.
It's an APC.
Yeah, so yeah, I was about to make that correction. Anyway, anyway, I won't start talking about that. Tank's technically not the right word for any of those vehicles. I'm obviously into tanks, as I'm now revealing. The CEO of Jagex is into tanks. He let me start up one of his tanks in a crowded game development conference, causing the security to come running. And ever since, I have been infatuated by the man. So, you know, and it just, every journalist is into other things apart from writing about games all day. And again, because journalists like the sound of their own voice and their own words, most of us are on Twitter. All games journalists I know are on Twitter and fairly heavy users. That's a place you can go to gauge our interests and what makes us tick, and maybe distract us with letting us start the engine of a tank.
Right, so here's another little tip. If you want to get the kind of ears and eyes and the mind of the journalist, then having a tank is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions then from the floor? One at the back.
How do you feel about game companies who hire outside companies to handle their PR?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I guess I should make a distinction in case anyone doesn't know. Typically, game companies there's two types of PR. An agency, which might be, some agencies are actually only 1 or 2 people, but most are dozens of people. And an agency PR would represent, so I worked at an agency PR representing Sega. Typically, agencies handle the consumer national newspapers and magazines, whereas an internal PR person, someone who's employed and part of your day-to-day team and your developer, will cover specialist press, Edge, Games TM, etc., and trade press like Develop. Now, I think most press warm more to an internal PR because they see that as part of the company. But that doesn't mean there's not good agency PRs. There are a few, and if you were at the point of wanting me to recommend, you know, it's probably not something you should do on stage, but if you wanted me to tell you who the good ones were individually, I can. But yeah, there's something about an agency. Let's say, it would be unfair of me to say names, but you've got Giant Games Company. Now, let's say you've got a fairly medium-sized games company. Someone's done well, like the Rovio guys, and then the Angry Birds lot, and then they have this enormous, they don't, by the way, but just picking them as an example of the kind of studio I'm talking about. If they use this enormous agency and your point of contact is this PR agency, then it feels like, for me as a journalist contacting the agency, I'm kind of contacting people that aren't part of the culture and character of that company. And I think when you're a small studio, or a startup, or an indie studio, affording an agency is going to be tough. It doesn't necessarily mean, employing one person to do internal PR is also expensive for a young studio, but if you can find someone who just happens to have a bit of charisma on Twitter, is good with person-to-person stuff, is a more confident, characterful member of your team, they can probably handle PR, and as a journalist myself, and I think it's fair to say most journalists would warm to speaking to a guy who also is part of the development team, rather than agency PRs. Again, they can be very good, but agency PRs are slightly more this distant, abstract entity. And yeah, as an extension to that point, PR is presented as a thing PR agencies spend hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds on projects and come up with all these plans and come up with this. It makes it sound like a very large, dominating, impossible thing for a small studio to do. But in the same way that game development has been democratised and game journalism has been democratised, and there's been this rise of the smaller studio and the return to the bedroom coder, that does mean that journalists like myself are a bit more open to hearing from the small guy, the smaller studio. So yeah, PR doesn't have to be about hosting expensive press events and about sending out very polished press releases, and it can just be as simple as showing your face at events, joining in the conversation with Twitter, and making your company liked. Should we?
Yeah, that's fine. One more quick question. Okay.
What sort of level should you have something at before you contact a journalist? Can you submit, say, a demo of something like
Yeah, I think 99% of games journalists are very much understand, that incompleted code is an incompleted code. I mean, even the biggest developers in the world, every time, I'm sure, maybe you've already had this experience, but it seems like every time you show some preview code to press, it breaks when the press is there in front of you. But every journalist I know is very honourable in that manner. I mean, you can do the teasing thing, maybe, just screenshots and art to attract a bit of hype, and the more clever ways you can think of it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if we talk later or anything, I'm sure I'll come up with some. But you can drip feed information to build anticipation, but generally that only works for studios that have already got a hit behind them or got some status behind them, because then it's, what is company X doing next? But yeah, I mean, you don't want it riddled with bugs and looking horrendous, but I think showing press early, especially if it gives me, the journalist, a bit of they've let me in, they've opened their doors to me and given me this exclusive look, then yeah, I think I wouldn't fret too much about showing stuff early. And there is, when something's off the record, when I can't account for every journalist on earth, but most journalists I know, if a developer says, please, this is off the record, keep this to yourself, journalists will, because you've got to remember, don't complicitly trust every journalist you ever deal with, but I make a living out of giving the public information about your games, and if you say, please, Will, keep this off the record, and I screw you over, you're never going to deal with me again. So journalists, it's in our interests to respect off the record. I mean, you can make me sign something that will say I'm not allowed to talk about it till this date, although in a way I think journalists slightly more warm to there being a bond of trust off the record, and there's certainly, I don't know if anybody's left in here, but there's certainly developers over the years I've built up really good trust with, so they can tell me stuff that, that I would keep off the record. But yeah, you can make journalists be quiet and they're not going to berate your game because we know that incompleted code means it's not a final experience. But, maybe the first few times you do it, baby steps at first, because, there are unscrupulous journalists around who make a living out of headlines, right? So in fact, news and features, that's probably, have I got time to waffle about this?
Not too long.
All right, I'll try and do it in 30 seconds. News is all about websites getting clicks and more readers and circulation and that kind of thing. So when working with a journalist on news, maybe a bit more careful than if I'm writing a 4-page feature about the changing role of serious gaming and you're contributing, because then it's about informing the reader for me, not about the headline. So maybe just tread a little more carefully with news.
Okay, that was excellent. Thank you very much.
Cool, cheers. Thank you.
All right, next up is John Weinbrain from the National Film and Television School. He used to be an associate director of Tiger, if you don't know. He's the independent.
Guessing you have to click this onto you. Okay.
About 5 years ago, John was the other associate on the Tiger board. He has subsequently gone on to lead the NFTL, National Film and Television School MA course. And that's really sort of interesting. John is also a member of BAFTA. BAFTA, if you didn't know, has fully embraced the computer game development industry, so that they look after now film and television and computer games. I know that John actually stood quite recently for election to the BAFTA Game Development Board. I don't know whether or not he did.
Haven't heard anything, so assume not.
But,
mind you, I've got another story about that.
Yeah, okay. The National Film and Television School is a centre of creative excellence. John leads the MA course, and I asked him to try and deliver a presentation about the cutting edge of interaction across those screens, across mobile television and, well, online, PC basically, tablets. I'm not sure how he's going to present that, but here is John Weinberg.
Hi. I think since we're about an hour behind, I'll probably be really brief and cut to the chase. And I might sort of I had lots of things to show and lots of, I might just lower the lights a little because it's late and you probably want to have a little rest at this stage. So let's see how that is. Is that good? That's kind of nicer, isn't it? Okay. So, as I say, what I was going to do is I was going to give quite a sort of extended treatise on interactive cinema from the beginning. And when you sort of try to talk about the cutting edge of things, you usually end up talking about the trailing edge, or what happened in the past. And that's what I was going to do. So I was going to show you lots of clips from the past of a history of cinema and showing how cinema was always interactive. I won't do that. I'll move on a bit. I might show you a few little clips, depending on what our time, but I'm just very conscious that it's late in the day, and you've got Dave here, who's going to really wow you, so I'm just going to, like, the sort of, I'm the cool down act, right? So, right. I wanted to talk about early cinema and how early cinema was essentially an interactive entity, you could argue. And that slide had the Lumiere brothers, the arrival at the train at La Ciotat station. Okay, so here's, the thing is, does everyone know the story about the arrival of the train and what happened to the audience? Yes? Oh, good, interaction. Go on, tell us.
They all dived out of the way and were scared of the train coming through the seats.
Yeah, you agree? Yeah, allegedly. All right. Apparently, it's not. It's allegedly. It's not necessarily true. What I found out was the Lumiere brothers remade La Ciotat in 1935 as a 3D stereoscopic experiment, one of the early stereoscopic experiments. And there may have been some confusion at the audience reaction then and the audience reaction now. However, he also dug up this rather interesting clip. Oh my goodness! Don't worry about that. Shall I show you now? So that's supposed to show first film within a film. And that was by a chap called Robert Paul in 1901, who showed the Lumiere brothers film inside the film and showed this rather strange little guy dancing around then jumping out the way. So one wonders whether interactive cinema and interactivity using film was actually fiction right from the start. So that's kind of my opening point, my opening challenge to you. I'm going to see how fast I can get through the rest. Okay, so I want to talk about participation in cinema as well, in general. And obviously, this is a great example. And if I click on one of those things, I would probably show you a horrific clip from that particular production. Does everyone know the Rocky Horror Picture Show? Everyone familiar with? Good. Okay. Now, I want to also talk about involvement in cinema. And now this, I think, is quite extraordinary. I'll do this again. Apologies. Horrific, eh? Right, so that was an interactive cinema advert from the 1950s quite extraordinary. So, and basically what you're seeing there is you're seeing the audience participate in a cinema, in an advertisement in a screening room, and what the audience was asked to do was read out those lines, and surprisingly, I suppose, you know, it being the States, not that there's anything wrong with the States and different from the UK, but maybe we're a little bit more reserved. They did. And they shouted out, and that's what happened. So it's quite interesting. Audience participation in cinema. There's a lot of more recent examples which I won't go into because of time, but this is quite an interesting one. 13th Street Last Call, which is another interactive horror film in cinemas, where it was basically mobile phone-based voice interaction. If we have a bit, you know what, let's just give it a quick go, because it's quite interesting.
13th Street, the channel for thrillers, horror, and crime. The challenge, audience should experience horror as never before. The idea? The first interactive horror movie in theaters. In regular horror movies, the viewer's role is always the same.
Do you know what?
With 13th Street, the horror film becomes an interactive thrill. The viewers play their own parts and are able to communicate with the protagonist. We develop a software that allows for such a dialogue via voice recognition. A flyer invites viewers to send their phone numbers to the speed dial database. The software selects an audience member and phones him or her. Then, through voice recognition, a dialogue between viewer and protagonist takes place.
Hallo? Hallo? Du musst mir helfen. Ich weiß nicht, wo ich hier bin. Bleib dran, ja? Ja. Okay.
The answers are converted into commands, and the software plays out the corresponding scene. Because of this, each caller creates a different film. Not only do the viewers hear the protagonist's voice on the phone, they experience her steps, her breathing, her entire fear up close and parallel with the film. Big.
Da unten ist jemand. Dann geh hoch. Okay. Was soll ich tun? Soll ich helfen oder weiter?
Weiter!
Helfen! Geh weiter!
Yeah, whatever.
The film hit its target audience exactly. Film lovers at cinemas.
Yeah. I get a bit fed up of that voice after a while, but sort of interesting stuff. You know, people really starting to do some. That's really a horrible light. Starting to do some experiments. It's not so long ago. Let's see what else we got. Whoops. Okay, interactive scale. But you kind of know all this stuff because you've read all about it, and it's quite old now. But it's the talk of the TV business. TV is no longer particularly profitable. The film and television entertainment department, film, television, by its remit, talks about adjunct material for every television production, student production or whatever, and that's pretty much common across the broadcasters as well. So television does not stand alone anymore. Whether it's interactive or not, who knows? It's just bundled more stuff, isn't it? So, you know, for example, second screen. Anyone heard of this idea of second screen? Yeah, for the second screen. Okay, second screen. So apparently when everyone sits with their iPad, and this is as well, sit with your iPad on your lap when you watch TV, and funnily enough, you have pay more attention to what's on your iPad than TV. So people have hit on a great idea, but wouldn't it be great to link the two together? So like what's on your iPad actually connects with what's on TV. So for example, State of the Union, we have your opinion. Very kind of really interesting thing. I'm sure you guys, and the whole idea of putting this forward, I suppose, for all you lot, is to seem to have dropped this. Is that bad? Someone should have told me. Someone should have told me I'd be tramping on the microphone. The whole idea about putting this towards all you lot is you can all do better. You can come up with more interesting ideas, whatever the medium. I just want to do this really quickly. So what? And my question to you, because as well as leading a course on the next developer, where I met Jeremy, I am also a bit of a theorist. And I asked this question: in order to participate in media, in order to participate in an experience, in an entertainment experience, is it that you have to do something? Is that what participation is? You have to call the cinema, call the movie on the phone and tell the person where to go? Do you have to shout at the screen to tell them about butternut coffee? Is that really interactivity? And again, it's just it's a question to throw out there. What about literature? What about theatre? What about pre-digital media? And this is what I wanted to postulate. I wanted to ask: is the story that plays in our heads as viewers, is it the same as the one in the creator's head? Okay, so is what we see, what we feel, what we experience, is that our story? How much are we bringing as an audience to our experience, or how much is the author's intention? It's not straightforward, is the answer. So I'm not going to throw it out like I normally do and get a big discussion going, because then we'll be here for a long time and you'll never hear from Dave, which will be sad. So I'm just saying it's not straightforward. And a lot of people have really figured this out a long time ago, particularly French intellectuals in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. In fact, French intellectuals since the French Revolution. This guy, Roland Barthes, postulated that authorship is no longer a useful concept. The author is dead. He wrote in Image, Music, Text an essay which said that a written work, a written text, only lives with the interaction between the artifact and the reader. It lives in your minds. Just because I've written it, I'm not important anymore. Writers forget it. Authors are dead. Writers are dead. It lives in the mind of the reader because we've got so much to offer when we read things. So what I'm pointing out perhaps on a theoretical basis is that this contemporary, does what we're doing now, what you're doing downstairs, what you're creating for your players and users or for yourselves, does it really expand this proposition that authorship and everything happens in terms of the interaction and interplay between the player stroke audience and the media artifact? Excuse me, losing my voice. Yeah, I'm going to skip over that one and get to the key. So, games. How does this work for games? What does it mean? And this is where I'll thank you. I have a glass of water. This is where we cut to the chase. I'm really here it's a thinly veiled disguise of promoting an MA course, which I'd like you all to apply for at the National Film and Television School. A new MA in Games Design and Development, which started at the beginning of this year. February 2012. It's been running a few months, and it runs alongside a whole lot of other established media forms: film, television, visual effects, animation. And the way the film school works, since I'm cutting to the chase, is that we have small specialists of 8 people studying film directing, 8 film producers, 8 production designers, 8 sound designers, 8 animators, 8 composers, etc., all working together on graduation, on second-year projects, on their postgraduate projects, adding to this mix eight maximum games designer developers. How's that going to work? How's that going to work? How are we going to work together with all the other specialist TV and film disciplines? Well, it does work, and we've started it. Anyway, that's as a background to games being the... Are we still the errant child of the media family? Are we culturally simplistic? Are we over-reliant? As my friend over here, the last year's winner, the famous Aaron, indicated that... that really when you're talking to people who are not necessarily mainstream game players, and there are a lot of them, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily play games as much as we all do, you have to be very careful. You didn't even call it games, you call it interactive media, and there's reasons for that, because it gets a bad rap. So there's, are we over-reliant on combat, violence, competitive sports? Is there significant audience gaps? Is there too much technology, not enough art? So that's all the question. I've got a funny little video that goes behind that, but I'm going to probably skip that one. But the idea is now games are the drivers of pervasive media. The games technology and techniques that you all are becoming proficient at drive media experiences that can happen just about anywhere, on your portable device in your pocket. The advertising billboard is no longer an advertising billboard. It's an animated movie that probably can respond to a Bluetooth input or even your presence. When you get money out of the bank, there's probably a little rolling ad that can interact with your card. So there's this, and the other thing that games can do as a pervasive media engine is we can make much faster animations, much faster movies, because the real-time digital animation that games engine produces means that you don't have to hang around for render time when you're creating a movie, creating a pre-rendered movie. So things like pre-visualization, machinima, all that sort of stuff. So, right, confluent media. What sounds like something you flush down the toilet. And in many cases, that's probably a good idea. Anyway, let me just talk about games acceptance now, as we alluded to. I'm sorry to hop around, but I just wanted to make this nice and fast so we have a chance of getting out here before midnight. BAFTA's an interesting organisation, isn't it, Jeremy? Really interesting. British Association of Film and Television Arts. You go there, 195 Piccadilly. It's the great and the good of the film and television industry. The lovies, you know, they're all sort, you know, really people, you know, David Attenborough, all these people hang out at BAFTA. It's all quite remarkable, really. But these are the sort of established stalwarts of these very, very respected art forms, film. They accepted television after a while as well, but it's cinema and television as art forms. So it's quite funny because in 1998 they incorporated interactive entertainment into this mix, and they called it interactive entertainment, taking a leaf out of Aaron's book. Don't call it games, because all the film and TV members will hate you, so call it interactive entertainment. And that went well. They discontinued it a few years later, 2003. No more interactive entertainment division in BAFTA, 2003. But then, suddenly, because of the amount of cash and success and economic potential in video games, as they called it, in 2006 they decided to embrace video games as the third pillar of BAFTA. Okay, 2006. Well, since then, approximately, it's a very, very small percentage of the BAFTA members are games members. I don't have the stats, but it's quite tiny. And so it hasn't quite taken off as they might want it to. So this year, another very established institution in the media landscape, the National Film and Television School, embraced games. But it's actually in a slightly different way, because what we're doing at the film school is we're looking at games as part and parcel and joined up to all the other media forms. And so what we're doing is we're sharing the development expertise of production designers, cinematographers, visual effects artists, sound designers, composers, and games designers and games developers. And what happens at the film school on the course that I've just started is that all these disciplines can work together on major projects. And that's a kind of a different way of doing it. It's not separating it out like BAFTA does, saying that's games, that's film, that's TV, etc. It's actually saying it's all stuff we get entertained, informed, and edified with. Now that television is as interactive as anything else, games doesn't really hold the it's not the only interactive form. So we just look at it as part of the mix, which is quite exciting, because to work with really, really amazing production designers who are going to go off and work on Harry Potter in a couple of years' time, or on Batman, to work with amazing cinematographers who will go and shoot your, go and work with Hollywood directors. It's a very exciting thing to do. Composers, sound designers, etc., etc. And so what we can do is kind of up our production asset values, and that's really important. I hope I haven't overstayed my welcome here. Okay, getting to the end, which is good. I managed to save 5 minutes. I've brought you back 5 minutes of your life. Right, so this is, the way that the course works is this, that everything is project by project based. It's a 2-year course, and it's maximum of 8 students per year, and it covers games design, game development, i.e. a bit of coding, game art, game animation. People can specialise, or more to the point, they tend to generalise in all these things. If they want, if projects need heavy-duty software engineering, it gets either bought in, or there's collaborations with other major institutions who specialise in computer science, for example, Imperial College, UCL, we're talking to Birmingham City, we're talking to City University and various other places. So the software engineering, we don't necessarily teach computer science for 4 years like Imperial College do, but we certainly talk to them and they get involved in projects. We do teach a little bit of coding, and very interested in that sort of art-code collision that our friend from Ulster was talking about. I think that is a really exciting course. But the way it's, as well as learning from nothing, 3D modeling, animation, game design, game producing, coding, ideas, development, anything else that falls into the mix. It also revolves around individual and group projects, lots of group projects. So the first thing we get the students to do is they do a group project called Hello World. Naturally, for the computer programmers around here, we call it Hello World. And this is what it is. I won't do that thing where I read out the text on a PowerPoint. But you can see essentially it's a collaborative world-building project where each student has to build a section of that world, so there's 7 individual elements with connectivity. Okay, and that's a challenge because it has to all fit together, has to be one piece, there has to be interactivity, and there has to be some seamlessness. And I think, if I'm lucky, as a little... Oh yeah, we collaborate with production design, concept art, sound design to do some sound, composing, all sorts of stuff. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to just show you a little bit of it. First output for the NFTS Games course, it was a historic moment after 6 weeks or so from the beginning of the course. Some of my 7 students have never done any 3D modeling or animation before, certainly no code, so I will see if this sort of works. It's a Fraps record, so it's not the best, but we'll do our best. And I am going to lower the lights because you can't see it otherwise. So this is me playing through it badly, and I will talk over it because I thought they'd do a nice little village set on a green or something, so it'd be nice and easy. You know, one of those sort of Unity terrains with buildings and people walking between it, all nice and simple. No, they didn't do that. They decided to do a series of labyrinthine caves, incredibly challenging. And being able to sort of navigate between those caves and sort of quite high concept stuff, a lot of work. So each room that you see, each area, is developed by one of the students. I think I can probably skip through some of it. I'll let you go into the. I'm going to just sort of do this randomly, or else it'll take far too long. Okay, so here we are in this room. I did want to show you one bit before that happens. Okay, this bit is important. So you have this funny stuff to do as well. So as well as these rooms, you've got bits and pieces that you have to do. So you have to light that balloon, and up it goes, moving swiftly forward. He's now in a quite incredible room, which is, they decided to do a spiral staircase with water and all sorts of stuff. Quite challenging again, lots of sound effects. So up he goes. Can you kind of see that, or is it really dark? Okay, it's too dark. I'll get forward for you. Now there's another room, another corridor, moving forward into another room, which kind of looks like this eye shape at the end. And it's all gone very quiet, isn't it? Okay, so I'll just let him do this because, so you've got this little thing there, you don't really know what that is. And there's the balloon that you lit earlier. And if you relight your, come on, that's me being lazy. Yeah, if you relight your torch, something vaguely interesting happens. Yeah, relight my torch off that balloon. And so this thing starts to go round, and also that unlocks a little key where, I wish I'd done this a lot quicker. Okay, I'll just give you the little reveal. So you go into this funny area you saw before. Where would life be without lens flare? Okay, so he's got this sort of funny dome-shaped room at the top. So you've got this, the first room was like with these cave teeth hanging down from the roof. The second room had this spiral. The third room had an eye shape. This room is a dome with lots of books. And eventually, coming up to the very top of it, it's difficult for me to skip. Actually, it's not that difficult to get to here. There he is. He's in the top bit now, and he has to do something to finish the thing off. So he finds a fireplace. Oh, that's a little bee. He lights the fireplace, and then finally, it's quite dark on this monitor, but there you go. So you find out where he was in the first place. So that was So that was a few weeks' work really, and they were learning, they were having their 3D modelling and animation lectures, Unity development lectures, coding, screen arts where they learn with everyone else, collaborating with production design. So they kind of had about 1 day a week spare to actually work on this when they were doing it. And that's what they came out with. So what they're doing now, what they've just completed is a second module, which is on app development. So they all created individually a mobile phone app using Unity again, iOS and Android. That was the rule that it had to work. And they just finished that. So we've got some projects there. Yeah, that's it.
Interesting thing for me, I don't know how the rest of you felt, but it's basically the idea of how how you might bring an interactive component to a mass market screen. That's basically it. So, do we have any questions from the audience? One over here.
Is it strongly based on narrative, sort of gameplay essentially?
No.
Because you were going on about art and as opposed to tech. Obviously you did mobile.
Yeah, we did mobile, but none of the mobiles were narrative based. Well, one was. One person did an interactive, one of these motion comics, motion graphic novels, but the others did tilt games, and they had to be very, very quick. They had about 1 week to do this thing, so there's no hand-waving storage, allowed with it. So yeah, and also the other thing is a small course, so 8 students maximum. It's whatever the students want to do, it's whatever they bring to the course. Obviously, I'm an old screenwriter. I am a refugee from film and TV, so I will bring a certain lot of that baggage to it myself. But it's not up to me, it's up to the students. I've got my own work to do, so I hope that answers that.
One more quick question.
No more questions.
No more quick questions.
Because obviously the NFTS is really about cinema and television as well, so kind of bringing this games element to it as well. Is it developing games that then serve the cinema industry or in some way? Because you talked about kind of interactive films and things like that. Or is it
because we've got because we've got a 2-year course, we can do all sorts of things. But one of the elements is called we give all these modules fancy titles. So one's called Playful Interpretations, where you take a transmedia idea from one of the TV entertainment shows or one of the graduation films, and you work with that team and you create a game's response. But it's not the game of the film. It's maybe, it's an adjunct. I don't know if you're into transmedia and Henry Jenkins. It's all about that, taking one idea, one property, spreading it across a variety of different experiences. So if a film has someone trying to fly a homemade aeroplane in it, for example, that could be an element of game. So there is an element of that, but it's not only that. We are not a service department for the other, for the film and TV projects. It's quite actually the other way around. All the sound designers all want to work with us. Why? Because they get a very, very tiny, it's very directorial if you're working on a fiction film. The film director says everything, and everyone does what they say. It's very authorial, it's sort of European maternity. In games, it's very collaborative. We just say, well, it's all a horizontal structure. So sound production design worked with us a lot on our projects. The concept for that was done by production design, the concept drawings, not the concept, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's more about, it's an exchange, and that's the whole idea. So within this ecosystem of film, television, visual effects, animation, we add games, and everything crosses over and flows together. Hopefully positive. Anyone who wants to apply, anyone who's interested, get in touch with me. This course starts in January, and we accept applications up to about September for the next year's intake, and we've heard such great things about this and about the people doing this particular game jam, and indeed Anglo Ruskin. They're always interested in hearing from people here.
Okay, that's right. Thank you very much, John. We have the keynote at the end, so I'm really sorry to say Dave Coleman from Microsoft has had an earlier engagement, which meant that he couldn't be here at the start of this so he's coming to it now, and it's going to be held. Dave is the Chief Engineering Officer for Microsoft, which basically means that he's kind of a futurologist. So I really wanted him here because he's got an interesting perspective on where the future of interactivity might lie. And in the last week, you might have seen that there was a presentation from Google, and it was something called Google Glass. Well, Dave has his own particular kind of variety of glass, which he can tell you about now. Dave Cockburn.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure I can be gobby enough. Do the lights come up any more? I'm just worried about you falling asleep. So first of all, thank you so much for sticking with this to the end. I will try and do my best to reward your stamina and your patience. So who the bloody hell am I? I'm the token long-haired, beardy technology bloke who works for Microsoft. My job, I have the best job in the company. I never tell my boss that, right? So my job is to think thoughtfully about what technology is going to be when it grows up. And I work within the advertising and online part of our business, but in particular, I work for Bing, the search engine part of Microsoft. You may not know Bing. It's the only search engine that you don't sleepwalk into using every day, but boom, that's the only advertisement that you'll get from me today. But my job is really not so much to think about, this is how it's going to be, what Microsoft says it's going to be. It's about having a conversation. We think these are some of the trends. We think some of the changes that are going to happen to us about how we use technology as a society. And if you think that's wrong, that's okay. You have my permission to call bullshit at any point in this presentation, and we have a conversation about it. In the interest of time, we may have to take it outside. That's fine too. Somebody can hold them okay. The other thing I have to tell you, I have to start every presentation with this, and it's kind of like group therapy for me. I once was an IT consultant. Don't hate me. But it builds you some rigor and some process about this stuff, about trying to say the right thing and get things in the right order. So I want to talk to you about some technology trends. I want to talk to you about, obviously, some challenges and obstacles. And these aren't things that are going to get in Microsoft's way. These are things that are going to get in all of our way about using technology in the kind of way we want to in a modern society. And then the thing that you learn at consulting school is you never do a presentation like this without ending with, 3 or 4 key takeaways. If you remember nothing else, these are the things that why that needs a northern accent, I don't know. But this is what you need to do. So let's look at some of the technology trends. So the first thing, most of you, I'm going to make some sweeping assumptions about most of you based on your age. We fail to see how much the internet has changed. Certainly in the last 10 years, we think of it as something that's a part of our everyday life. And yet the reality is, it's very, very different. So first of all, typically, have you all got computers at home? Yeah, right, of course you have, right? So what I see, and again, I work in IT, right? So I work with boring people in server rooms who try and make technology work for big corporations. And what we typically see is, increasingly, people are at home, have this really rich experience of technology. They shop online, they communicate with their kids on Facebook, they do all sorts, they play games, and then they go into the office. And that's typically what they're greeted with. They can't access Twitter or Facebook. The firewall blocks it. They've got some stupid clown with long hair and a beard trying to tell them how to use. They can't use their MacBook, or you can't use that software, and you can't do this. That's actually not what we're supposed to do. Technology is about enabling people, and we've reached this place now where people, because they're more productive at home than we allow them to be at work, it's kind of got messed up. And so we've got to work a bit to fix that, because this bloke, right, we have to get rid of this bloke, and we have to, this is the stereotypical dumb user. And you'll see him in 2 forms, right? First of all, you'll see him be created as a myth in the IT guy's mind, right? Which will be, you know what? You couldn't possibly understand how computers work. So I'm just going to patronize you and take all the way the control, so you have to do nothing, because I'll look after you, I'll keep you safe. That's the wrong way to think about how people use technology. The other side of the dumb user is people who use it as an excuse or a badge of honor. I do a lot of work in public sector. You see lots of people who do this. It's not just public sector. You may have colleagues. Your parents may be like this. These are the sort of people who, in public conversation, will say, don't know nothing about computers. In a modern society, that's like saying, I can't read. We can't afford to let people get away with saying stuff like that, because it's just not true. Most people, even the most digitally disabled of people, will be interacting with technology at some point, even if it's just pressing the red bloody button on their TV remote. That's enough. And yet we let those people exist. We let them get away with that. So when we roll out new software, we need a training course. We need to train those people who say they don't know anything about technology. But think about it. When was the last time Facebook or Amazon or us with Xbox sent someone round to your house? So, look, we've changed the interface a little bit. We thought before you use it, you might like some training. Come on. We might bitch and moan about, oh, bloody hell, they've moved it up here, there's a new dashboard, oh, bloody. But actually, we get on and we do it and we use it, because we're actually quite resilient as human beings. And so we have to move past this concept of the dumb user. The other myth that we have is about technology is just about kids. You know, new technology, oh, that's just for the kids, don't know nothing, it's just for the kids. That's just wrong. We know time and time again the biggest growth area in some of the really leading technologies, let's pick social networking as an example, biggest growth area is older generations, older people, people who use this stuff, you would never dream of using it. And if you don't believe me, a great test is in this country, watch Question Time on a Thursday night and spark up a browser and follow the Question Time hashtag. And what you'll see there is not a bunch of kids hurling abuse at each other, it's a bunch of grown-up adults engaged in democratic discussion about the running of the country. The fact that the BBC even bothers to put a hashtag up for mainstream programming is pretty significant. So we know that this stuff broadly exists, and we'll talk about casual gaming as well in a minute, in a similar sort of context. So we can't just say it's about kids. The other incredible thing is that how social networking is effectively humanizing the web. Apologies about the made-up word. I work for a North American company. That means I can make up words as I go along. And what's basically happening with social media is the social graph, the social network itself provides a rich, warm human signal that fundamentally transforms the way that some services on the web are delivered. So in order to get this, you have to understand that social networking isn't those stupid bloody comments we pass between each other, just had the world's best coffee, LOL, send. It's actually the network of people. And when you tap into the network of people, into existing services, here's an example of how we use it at Search at Microsoft. This is available in the US, but coming to the UK later. We tap into the social network when you make a search. So if I'm in the middle of Cambridge and I search sushi on my mobile phone, wouldn't it be nice to know, any good search engine will give me relevance, right? They'll give me relevant links. Here are the 10 nearest sushi restaurants. Well, okay, that's relevant. Which is the best? Which is the one I'm going to like the most? Which is the cheapest? Which is the one that's open tonight? So if I tap into the social network, I'm going to pick on Jeremy here, and let's say Jeremy and I are friends on Facebook. I search for sushi in the middle of Cambridge, and I can see from these 10 restaurants, here's one that Jeremy likes. Now, the interesting thing, because I have a relationship with Jeremy, I know he knows bugger all about sushi, right? In fact, if he's recommended somewhere, I am never, ever going to go there, because it would be stupid, right? But all of a sudden, I've moved, because I had a relationship with him, I've got this trusted thing that can help me make a decision, because ultimately that's what you want to do. So we've moved away from this cold world of relevancy powered by a binary, dark little bit of logic called the algorithm into a world where I'm now using something that's rich and warm and human, something that I can trust. And so you can see tapping into the social graph is going to change the way that services get delivered. And then we have this incredible revolution that's happening with mobile devices. And people don't really understand why this is so important. And especially it doesn't help because for years we've been told this is the year of the mobile. Somebody's been telling me that for the last 15 bloody years. But actually 2012 really is the year of the mobile. There are two important things about mobile devices that we have to really come to terms with. The first is one that people don't really get, but you guys will. It's the fact that for the first time your mobile device really is personal. Think about it. The phones that you carry, the slates that you have, they're probably all authenticated to the services you use. Your email, Twitter, Facebook, all of that stuff. And that's really powerful because it means we can personalize the services in a way never ever before possible. So the fact that you're authenticated makes them important. But the second piece, the bit that's really, really important for us to get, is that your relationship with technology fundamentally changes when you have one of these devices, when it's internet capable, because it brings the best of the digital world to wherever you are from an analog perspective. It helps you bring together all of the rich data and assets that's available on the internet to help you do stuff in the real world. I'll give you two examples. I have a son, he's 6, right? If you're a 6-year-old, Kung Fu Panda is a big deal, right? So just a bit of context. So there I am, Saturday morning in Sainsbury's on my own, dispelling all of the gender stereotypes about who does the grocery shopping in our house. It's me. But I'm in the DVD aisle because, you know, like getting proper food and stuff, that, you know, you've got to work up to that. And I see, a few months ago, Kung Fu Panda 2 has just come out on DVD. So again, if you're a parent of a 6-year-old boy, I'm thinking, if I go home with that, I'm going to be a hero for the rest of the weekend. Yeah, I'll have to do nothing else. But you see, the thing that you don't know is I'm a bit tight. I'm in Sainsbury's. That's not a place where I'd really buy DVDs from. What happens? Without thinking, phone comes out, quick look at the barcode, and I can see that actually that's not a bad price. I'll have that. So having the ability to dip into the digital world, the place I'm at, helped me make that decision. I bought the DVD, I went home a hero. Now we can have a debate about how, Amazon is causing the death of the high street and how this stuff is all terrible, and it is, it's an important conversation. But the bit I want you to latch onto is how much better my experience was because I could tap into the digital world. Let me give you another example. Any good train station in this country, let's pick on Cambridge, will tell you they have disabled access facilities. If you're disabled and in a wheelchair, that's next to bloody useless. What you really want to know is from where I am, show me where all of the curbs are dropped. Tell me which bloody door, which specific door do I go to that has the ramp so I can access the platform that I'm looking for. All of that data exists. It's just a question of using the mobile device to tap into it in the context of what I'm trying to do. So this capability for mobiles to disrupt is just starting to happen, and we'll get more and more. The more data we build, the more immersive we make this experience, the better it's going to be. Because, and somebody mentioned augmented reality already today, what we want to be in a place to do is to augment our physical experience. We want to be able to tap into rich sets of information, not just hold a camera up and see what points of interest are around me. What if I'm walking around town and I forget whether it was Will or Aaron, you mentioned the concept of gamifying just normal experiences. What if there's a tourism app for Cambridge and as I walk around I collect points for seeing the different landmarks and finding information about them, augmenting my experience, telling me more information. We're working on a pilot right now with Guide Dogs for the Blind, where we take somebody who's blind round London, and as they're walking down, let's say, Whitehall, and they pass the cenotaph, it tells them, not just that you're passing the cenotaph, it tells them about the cenotaph. It gives them more information based on their profile, helps them tap into this ritual to augment the experience that they have. This is what we all signed up for, right? This is about how technology makes the world a better place. So let's look at games. And you guys know much more about games than I do. I'm a gamer, or at least I was until I had a kid. Now I'm a closet gamer, because I should be doing the important household chores, not teaching him to play Forza, as I was the other day. He's quite good, actually. So games are really important for a number of reasons. So we've all talked about gamification. This is one of my favorite examples. Volkswagen, why Volkswagen, I don't know, but fantastic. Great website called gametheory.com, just showing how you can use game dynamics to change people's behavior. And this is what we're interested in. How do you make people make positive life choices? Their example, here you've got an escalator that's, everybody goes up the escalator and nobody bothers with the stairs. How do you change that behavior? Well, you get a bunch of people like you in and a few electronics engineers, and you turn the staircase into a real working piano. And all of a sudden, guess what happens? It's fun to go up the stairs. People will do that. They'll spend time there. There's another example where they gamified a recycled bottle bank, and you would get points based on how many bottles you put in. And they did it, and it's all done in Scandinavia for some reason. And this one bottle bank got more visits in that one weekend than all of the other bottle banks in the city put together for a year because they gamified it. So this is how you tap into game theory, and this is a big part of why games are important. I want to talk to you about the side of games that people often don't talk about, but why they're important to people like me. So I live in Banbury. I quite often commute into London. And my experience when I commute into London every day that I do it is the same. I get on the train, and getting on the train next to me will be some very important looking, typically gentlemen, but not exclusively gentlemen. I'm so glad I wore a suit today. I feel just like with you, but it helps with this example. And they will there, suit, tie, and they will have a number of things, right? So they'll have a Financial Times status symbol. They'll have a big wad of paper. The bigger the wad of paper, the more important your job obviously is. And then they will have some kind of mobile device. It might be a slate, it might be a phone, whatever. And so what they'll do is they'll elbows out on the table, right? And they'll establish their domain. And they will have the paper there and all this and the slate. And they'll have terribly important, yeah, bloody hell. All these things to do. And we've got an hour. What an hour. They don't have to be posh, right? But sometimes it helps with the example. So they're there, and then, 10 minutes into the journey, and it is just 10 minutes into the journey, they're like, nobody's looking. Out comes the mobile device, Angry Birds. Cut the rope. These are people who I have spent 20 years of my life trying to get interested and excited about technology. These are people who would say, I possibly want to use a laptop. Why would I want to use a computer? How could it help me? I'm not really interested in that. They're playing bloody Angry Birds or Cut the Rope. Bejeweled, mindless stuff. But all of a sudden, they've got a relationship with technology. They're carrying a device with them that they find valuable. So to a geek like me, that means I've got them hooked, right? So you like Angry Birds, do you? Right, well, here's some stuff that can change your job. These change the process that you do a business. So I've got a new audience of gamers, a new audience of technology lovers that I would have never had before thanks to casual gaming. And so it's so important to continue to create that affinity with technology because we still, stupidly, you don't, but people in my industry stupidly see technology as this separate part of our lives. It's this thing that you bolt on. Because old farts like me still remember a time where you only ever saw a computer at a place of work or a place of study. You never had them at home. Good God, you know, these are special things, thousands of pounds. They are a natural part of our lives. And we have to come to terms with that. Then we also talked about screens, and John, you talked about this. Well, you did talk about it, but now he's buggered off. So actually, we can have some fun. So Microsoft, for a long time, has been going on about this concept of 3 screens and a cloud, which, if you're Microsoft, in the early days meant we'll take something that you can have on a PC, put it on a TV, and a mobile phone. You like that? Well, okay, that's interesting. What I want, actually, is today's interpretation of that is actually, I want the same kind of experience. I want to have the same context of what I'm doing, but deliver me a different experience depending on the device that I have. So, for example, if I'm sat at home and we're watching the latest Bond movie, I'm sat with a family, right? So when the Aston drives by, I'm not going to pause it and rewind and look at the Aston again, right? Because wife's going to kill me, son's going to get bored. But you know I'm sat there with a slate, you know I'm sat there with a laptop or maybe a phone. So why don't you serve me the content there? You know that the car's going to drive by because we can audio fingerprint what you're seeing. You know that I'm sat with a family because I can look into the living room with your permission. Serve me the content there. How cool would that be? And so there's a whole range of work going into it, extending and augmenting the experience in the living room. And this goes, you know, really far, and there's some really interesting experiments about, you know, knowing what your social status is, and not whether you're single or not, but are you sat on your own? Are you sat with a bunch of friends? Are you down the pub? And changing your experience based on that. And then the next part of this is moving into a very, very different world. And this is a video we do, every now and again we do these envisioning videos of what we think the world's going to look like in 10 years. And the bit I want you to pick out from this is just that every surface here is a screen. It's not a piece of plastic and glass. It's the table, it's the floor, it's the wall, it's the fridge door. Every single thing has a capability to have stuff displayed on. This is the world that we're heading into. This isn't that far away. It's maybe 10 years away, where everything around you could be displayed. And the bit I want you to think about is, you know what happens now, right? When you watch some science fiction, and typically it's a crappy science fiction film from the 80s, and you'll see they'll depict like the office or home of the future. And in that depiction, there in the middle will be this huge CRT monitor. And if you're like me, you look at that and you think, oh, that's cute. I remember. You know, I remember when we used to have a monitor so big, I could dry my motorcycle gear off the back of it, and it would be dry by the time I went home. We're going to have the same kind of reaction in a few years when we watch Minority Report or something like that, and we see those bits of plastic and glass, and we think, oh, I remember it was all flat screens, not like the interactive paint surface as it is today, that sort of stuff. And as games designers, you've got to think about what does that mean for the gaming experience. If you've got a player that's looking at different screens, that you could augment that experience in different ways, what could you do from a game's perspective? If you've got a player that enters an environment like this, and all of a sudden the stairs could change, the wall could change, the windows could change, what kind of an experience could you build around that? Because this is the world that we're heading into, and it's incredibly exciting. We also have other technologies. So this is from my research labs. This is a project called Skinput, which enables you to interact with a computer using your arms, your body. And what use is that? Well, actually, this is the ability to control an MP3 player by tapping your finger, dial a telephone number by writing the number out in the palm of your hand. All of this stuff becomes really important. And for us, we talk about this concept of screens disappearing. So no longer do I have to be sat in front of something in order to be able to use a computer. screen almost becomes irrelevant. It's how I interact in many different ways. And this is all stuff that you can look up on the interweb. Then there's a product called LumiShare, which uses the principle of Connect. You all know about Connect, right? Fine. So cheap, low-cost device, and projects an experience that connects two disparate players. So here you've got two girls playing together, and they're playing different games. You'll see in a minute they'll play cards. And what happens, so here they are playing cards, so there's a physical deck on the right-hand side, there's a virtual deck on the left-hand side, and obviously that's inverted for the other player. So all of a sudden I'm able to connect 3D experiences, to connect different people with immersive experience. And again, this whole concept of display changes as a result. And what if these cameras, these projectors, what if they're the same price as the Connect? You know, they're 80 quid a pop or whatever. The world starts to get very, very exciting and very interesting. And then we've got to get past this concept of personalization. We talked earlier about mobile devices and being logged in and authenticated and how important that is. But we often forget just how crap personalization is today. My experience of personalization is typically on Amazon, and I'll go to Amazon and it'll be, hey Dave, welcome back. I see that you've bought books on Batman. Would you like books on Spider-Man? Right? To me, that's just really bad. That's really stupid. Because anybody knows that there is the dark, brooding, brutal, gothic kind of Batman, and then there's the slightly camp 1960s TV show. They're both very different things, so you can't make one recommendation based on another. The comic geeks amongst you will know that actually Batman's a DC title, Spider-Man's a Marvel title. That's very, very different. So my point is personalization is this really blunt, basic tool. What if I could tap into a really rich set of context about an individual when they use services? How could I change the experience? And this is the way that we tend to think of it. We think about this context in 4 domains. So there's an emotional domain of the context. So am I happy or am I sad? When we demoed Connect the first time, before it was ever called Connect, it was called Project Natal, and we demonstrated it with a game called Project Milo. And Project Milo basically could ascertain whether the player was smiling or frowning, and depending on what they were doing, it would change the storyline. So if you were frowning, it would then tell you jokes, change the storyline to make you laugh. It's a very basic thing, right, in the moment, but actually it exists and it will get developed. So actually, and why is this important? Well, we all consume services differently based on our emotional state. If we're sad, for me, I'll listen to different music than when I'm happy. If I'm sad, I'm listening to the blues. If I'm happy, it's Kylie's greatest hits every time. Yeah, I hope you realize that was an example. So then there's a social domain. The social domain, as we talked about before, about extending the living room experience. So I will behave differently watching the football, sat on my own at home, than when I'm sat watching the football with my family. I'm sat watching the football with my friends. When I'm down the pub watching the football on a big stream with friends and people who may support the other team, or if I'm sat watching a laptop stream connected to other people on social network. All of those different scenarios, I will behave in a different way. So then there's environmental domain. So if you, and this happens today, if you search for sushi on a mobile phone walking down the centre of Cambridge at around lunchtime on a weekday, I'm going to assume that you're hungry. And the first results I'm going to show you are going to be the location of restaurants. If you make that same search at home at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, you might be hungry. You might also be looking for a recipe. You might also be trying to plan a night out for 2 weeks' time. You might be looking up the history of sushi. All of those things are possible. But the very fact that you're using a specific device, specific location, specific date and time changes what you do. And then finally, there's this broad sort of context around that's an external context that's how we behave, how we respond to broad media themes. So in the run-up to the Olympics, we're all thinking about sport more than we ever would normally. In the run-up to Children in Need, we think about kids and charity more than we ever would do normally. So my proposition is, what if you could tap into that context real time at the point of consumption of services and change the service as a result? That's pretty powerful. And despite some really scary ramifications about privacy that we'll talk about, actually that's an incredible world of personalization. That would really take us to that next generation. And then the final piece of this is how we have multiple personas, especially when we're online. How many of you are on Facebook? How many of you are on LinkedIn? How many of you use LinkedIn to talk to your friends? Right? How many of you use Facebook to try and find a job or to talk to, right? So what's happening, a few of you, so what's happening mostly is that we choose different platforms for different parts of our persona. I am not, clearly, Dave the bloke from Microsoft all the time, as much as my wife would argue with you. Occasionally, I'm Dave the dad, I'm Dave the motorcyclist, Dave the gamer. All of those things are different parts of my persona, and I need the control over how I interact with people, especially online, to be able to exert those. And again, through that kind of personalization and really a betterment of how we use personas, we get to a world where we can expose those. Then there's this other buzzword that we have called big data. So what happens when you have lots and lots of data and you connect it together? So finally, here's a game that you can play at home. So big data enables you to take a really broad view. And when you take a really broad view, has everybody told you to take a step back and think about, and probably when you've done something wrong, take a step back, think about what you've done. So data enables you to take that view. Here's my favorite example, right? 2 cars, Toyota Prius, Land Rover Defender. Which is better for the planet? Right, so hands up if you think it's a Toyota Prius. Hands up if you think it's a trick question and it's the Land Rover Defender. Hands up if you're a budding consultant. If you're a consultant, the answer is, and actually I shouldn't ask that question in public because people don't like to admit that, but if you're a consultant, the answer to any question is it depends, right? And this is one of those questions where it does depend. If you measure the impact on the environment on a really narrow place, right, the day-to-day impact, of course it's the Toyota bloody Prius. The thing drinks water and runs on pixie dust, right? So nothing happens. And then not like the Defender that bloody does 14 miles to the gallon. Actually, if you take a systemic view of the data, if you look at the impact of the Land Rover on the planet from the point at which its components were made through to the point at which you stuff it onto the tip or you take it down the scrapyard, it's actually the Land Rover Defender because over 75%, this is like an advert for Land Rover, isn't it? Over 75% of every Land Rover ever made is still on the road. They are basic, simple, agricultural bits of kit. That's why you find them all through Africa and through most parts of Asia, because you can keep them running. You can fix them with bubblegum and baling twine, right? So you see, having access to the data fundamentally changed the outcome of the answer. And that happens in all sorts of ways. And what's going to happen, the more we get access to this data and the better we are at using it, we're going to be faced with some really interesting questions, questions that really affect the very core of what we think humanity is. Here's my favorite example from the Northeast US. Last year, they took the cell phone usage data from 50,000 people over 3 months, every call they made, the duration, the location, the time of day. And with some pretty smart maths, they found out that they could predict the future location of people with only 93% confidence. So only 9 times out of 10 would they be right about where you were going to be next week. And what I love about that, right, as an example, is here you are and you think you live this wacky random lifestyle like I do. I don't know where I'm going to be next week. Cambridge, well, could be anywhere. Actually, there's a statistician who goes, actually, I know exactly where you're going to be and it's going to be there. Bloody hell. And this stuff's just going to rock our world. It's going to make us think really, really different about who we are. We use big data at Microsoft, and we used it to do some really cool things. It's quite nice when you're a company like Microsoft. So here's our problem. This is the controller, right? It's okay to people like you and me. To your average casual gamer, it's a bit scary, right? What we really wanted was this. And we wanted to develop the Connect. And so we started the way that Microsoft would always start these projects. We'd get a bunch of coders together and they wrote algorithms and bits of code and they found out we couldn't bloody do it. We simply couldn't figure it out. It was too hard. We couldn't make it accurate. We couldn't make it work. So what we needed to do was to get lots of data about how it could work. And so we seeded about 1 million households with the Connect device before they were shipped. And we streamed the data. So when Dave does that in his home, and this is the command that he was trying to select, that's important data. And we use this thing called machine learning, which takes all of that data and creates algorithms from that data that ultimately shipped into the Connect and made it the device that it is today. So data's massively important. More and more data becomes available. As games designers, it's stuff that you can tap into, even if it's just to make your game more immersive, to bring different types of content to the game. It's quite important. But again, from a gamification perspective, there's lots of things you can do for social good. But it also has the benefit of meaning that actually data scientists, the data geeks, the mathematicians amongst us, these are going to be the rock stars of the new world, right? These are going to be the people who are the only people who can figure out, and this is already happening today, if you get close to big organizations like Microsoft, but not just us, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, anybody who's into analysing an element of what happens, it's all about data. And this is really crucial to understand, because these are going to be the guys that help the world turn. So I promised you some challenges and obstacles. The first one is this classic thing that we've always faced. The better we get at doing this stuff, the higher our expectations are as a society that we want it to do more. My favourite example was I was sat with my lad, we were doing some stuff with Channel 4 News about the time that we released the voice control of Xbox, so just before Christmas. And we've got the beta code at home, and I was going to get interviewed the next day, so I'm doing my homework like any good sort of company representative, and I'm sat with my son, and he's like, you know, Xbox, play this game, Xbox, play this movie, and it's all pretty cool. And then he looks at me, and he runs off into the kitchen, and then I hear this little voice, microwave, make my tea. Dad, the microwave's bust. And of course he's 6, right? But to him, you know, if I can control the TV with my voice, why can't I control the microwave? You know, why that should work. And so this is one of these really natural human traits that we've got. And for me, the thing I love about it is twofold. One, because our expectations will always outstrip our capability to deliver, I'm always going to have a job in futurology. But hey, not that you should care. So I may suck at it. You have to tell me afterwards. But secondly, the more you bitch and moan about not being able to do the stuff that you want to do with the technology, yeah, the iPhone 5 is great, but it doesn't do this, does it? Actually, at least we're then engaged in the conversation. I know that if you weren't talking to me about it, I haven't even got a conversation. I haven't got any input from what's going. So the louder we are about our expectations, the better we get at making it happen. So then we have this other classic challenge, which is just in terms of just the data, the quantity of data that exists. From the beginning of time to 2003, we created this much data. We create the same amount of data every 2 days. Just think about that for a minute. It's absolutely phenomenal quantity of data getting published every single day. Our challenge now is not that the data, whether the data's there or not, it's finding the bloody stuff. I don't know how many of you have my kind of problem. My hard drive at home is filled with photos. The photos are family photos that I've taken. My wife will come to me on a Friday night and she'll say, well, could you find that photo of John? I think he was 2 and we were on holiday somewhere. And I'm just thinking, brilliant. That's my Friday night shot at that point, because I'm there like, is it this one? No. Is it this one? No. Well, this one? No. Because I can't, I've got so much stuff. In the old days, when you used to go and get your film processed, you had a limited choice. You knew it would be one of these albums somewhere, but there was only be 5 or 6 photos you'd have to go. Now you've got billions of the things because they're bloody free. So we have to get better at finding stuff and finding stuff in a way that it can be used. Then we have this other problem as a society where we keep falling back on the crutch that technology is here to replace our need for thinking. It's here to solve our problems, that we don't have to bother with stuff now because computers will do it. And that's just wrong, wrong, wrong. The point about computers is they're here to augment us. They're here to add on, to supplement what we do, make us greater than the sum of our parts. And my favourite example of where you can see this failure to sort of understand that is in any local paper, in any week of the year. You will find a picture of some poor bloke who's just smacked his truck into a low bridge, right? And he'll be asked by the journalist, you know, well, what happened? And the reply will be, sat-nav made me do it, right? Really? Yeah, sat-nav told me to go down here, you know. Well, at which point did you hand over your cognitive capability to this device and just say, make all my decisions? That's not what computers are about. Computers are about expanding the experience, giving you more information so that you can do the stuff that you want to do better. And it is about how do you make it get further and how you push yourself. And we'll talk about that in a second. Then there's freaks like me, right, who are going to get in your way. And I hope not for too much longer. But, you know, you're going to run into IT people, especially if you work with clients or big companies, who are going to want to stop you from doing the crazy, wacky shit that you guys do. Right? And sometimes you shouldn't be doing crazy, wacky shit at work, but most of the time you'll be doing interesting, innovative stuff that should happen, and it's going to help benefit them. And IT dinosaurs like me have got a choice to make. We've either got to sit there and continue to patronize you for as long as it takes for you to find a way to work around me, or we can spend some time really understand how can we put you in a place such that you can do what you want to do, so that you can access those ports on the firewall, or that you can develop on this tool, or you can use this application and make a difference. And then there's this other cultural thing, this problem we have called the arrogance of the present. You have already talked about it this afternoon, about how people talk about games and they have this really different view of what games are. The problem is people can't measure the future benefit of anything because all they can measure, all they can use as a measure is how they feel today. A classic example, Henry Ford goes to the bank in 1903 to get some money to go and make the Ford cars. And the bank, the president of the bank says, "What? What? Look out the window. Tell me what you see." "Well, I see horses, lots of horses." "Right. How many cars do you see?" "Well, there are no cars." "Right. Come back when you've got something that deals with horses." And the point of the example is not to say that the president's an idiot. It's just that the day he made that statement, he was 100% correct. He couldn't envisage a world that would be powered by the automobile. People you talk to about games will be in the same place. They can't envisage. Talk about the journey that, Aaron, that you went on, about, how do you help a company like Kraft understand the capabilities of gamification? They don't just naturally get it. You've got to walk them through because they measure it with the mindset of today. So when you develop your projects, when you work with your clients, when you think about how can you get them to where you are from a mental perspective, it's about taking a step back, understand that the arrogance of the present exists. You can't beat it, but you can recognize it. And you can maybe think, well, what if the world was a bit like this? What if people did work in this way? How would my experience be different? Then we have some other societal problems, and these are big issues, and we laugh at them, we laugh them off, but they are really significant. Will, you talked about this earlier, about comments on the blog, and one of my biggest fears about internet use as a society is people being shit to one another, doing stuff online that they would never do face to face. Where I was this morning, I was actually at our head office in Reading talking to a bunch of primary and secondary age kids about how they can do really cool stuff with technology. I had to spend 10 minutes talking about how crap cyberbullying is and how they've got to stay safe online. I don't want a world like that. I don't want people to have to worry about it. I don't want to sit over the shoulder of my 6-year-old when he's using computers so he ends up seeing stuff that he shouldn't or being somewhere that he shouldn't, or have people bully him because people are just crap when it comes to being online. We all have a part to play in this. We all exist online, and there's a difference, please, between trash talking in the middle of Battlefield or, just being crap to one another. But be good to people. Treat people online just as you would treat them in real life, and make sure those that are around you, make it socially unacceptable to be shit to one another online. It's so important because that's the stuff that's going to get it shut down. That's the stuff that's going to stop us from being able to get as far as we want to. We live in a society where free speech is really important. I can't tell you the number of publications who've thought about turning comments off, or even go as extreme as Australia, who actually, as a society, as a government, considered making anonymized comments illegal. That's a really bad answer to this problem, but it is a problem, and so we have to change the way people behave. And then the mother of all problems is about privacy, right? Because privacy is this really, really hard thing. Privacy isn't the same for any of us. It's different. It's unique to us. And so companies like Microsoft, we can't just put software out and say, you know what? There's a line. Anything above the line's private. Anything below the line's public. Because you may not agree with that line. You may think the line should be somewhere else. That line may change based on the context of what you're doing at any given point in time. So what you have to do is you have to do what Zuckerberg did. You have to give you control, give the users control. So now you're sat on 500 bloody settings that affect your privacy. You have no idea about the permutations, but you have control. And so this is a conversation that's going to be ongoing with us as a society, with us as technology companies, and with the government about what the right thing is to do. You've got to help us with that. You've got to be part of that conversation. But the other thing we have to understand is that our expectation of privacy changes as society evolves. I'll give you 2 examples, one made up and one real. If I go into, and you can figure out which is which, if I go into my local pub, I walk through the door, and the landlord goes, "All right, Dave, your usual." And as I cheekily saunter up the bar, trying not to sort of exert any external sort of notification of my emotional state, which is inside, I'm going, yes! 20 bloody years of patronage at this pub, and now finally I've got personalised service. Fantastic. My relationship is in tatters at home, but my landlord knows what I like to drink. Fantastic. So why then, when I go to a pub in the middle of Cambridge that I've never been to before, and the landlord goes, "All right, Dave, your usual," do I go, "Whoa, bloody hell, how did you know?" And I have this really weird reaction. Well, because my expectations are that this bloke doesn't know. How could he do that? But that's only because that's my expectations of how it works. Well, if there was a website called makeminealocalpint.com, I've registered the URL before any of you try it, and just in case, you never know. And I upload a picture, here's what I like to drink. Landlords of the country, avail me of your service. All of a sudden, I'm in a world where that's my expectation of what the service could be. And that's why privacy is so hard. The real example of how this happens in our lives, some of you will remember this, some may not. I remember when we first got caller ID on our landline phones, and some of you will have had this experience, which will be, what? You mean my number is going to get displayed wherever I phone? I don't bloody think so. Puh, I'm not having that. And fast forward to the modern times, right to now, it's Friday night, I've just got in, it's a bit late, the phone rings. Don't recognise that number. Do you recognise that? But I'm not fucking answering that. Fantastic service. It's brilliant. Right? So you can't, you know, as technology companies like us or BT or whoever, you can't just say that's privacy. It has to evolve. And as a society, that's the challenge. We have to get that debate. We're stuck in this place where all we could ever do when we talk about privacy, and typically it's in mainstream media, we have this stupid conversation like Facebook causes cyberbullying. No, it doesn't. Shit people cause cyberbullying. It's nothing to do with Facebook. Facebook may make it easier, may make it happen quicker, but fundamentally it's about shit people being shit to each other. So until we get to a point where we have that debate, where we can talk about how we should behave online or what we should do in terms of privacy, we kind of get stuck with what we can do. So I promised you some pithy takeaways. First thing, we have to educate for our future. We have to stop teaching people tools. I don't want to have this joke with my headmaster, my son's headmaster. If I ever catch anybody teaching my son how to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or any bloody software, I'm pulling him out of school. Those skills are useless to him. My grandfather went to a school without electricity. My dad went to a school without computers. I went to a bloody school without the internet. Kids today, they're going to school without hover cars, right? Poor kids, right? So, but if all we've ever done is been taught how to use the specific tools that are available at that point in time, what bloody use is that when you ultimately come out at the other end and you try and get a job? You know, when I went to university, we had word processors, and it was horrible, 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 right? No way. They tried to teach us how to use word processors. What use is that to anybody? So we have to evolve. We have to talk about skills, not tools. We need things like critical thinking. Critical thinking is really important, something that you probably all do without thinking, but actually we need to do more of. Critical thinking is when you read something, be it online or in print, you actually think about how do I, what's the source of that information? You know, do I trust that source? Could it be biased? Could I, you know, authentic? Could I verify that by looking up somewhere else? This is like, you know, what happens today is schools typically think that Wikipedia is the just absolute abyss of despair when it comes to education. They're crowdsourced encyclopedia? Really? You don't even have to get it published? Really? Anybody can? Really? I don't think so. And yet actually Wikipedia is a really important resource. So I want to make sure that my son, for example, gets taught. When he sees something on Wikipedia, he sees an article, he can then think, oh actually, hang on a minute, it's been crowdsourced this. Right, so it might be right, there's a good chance it's right, but I better go and check it just in case. But he's then in the place to use the technology to make a difference. Because again, remember, this is about augmenting experiences. I have to tell you, this happened to me only 2 days ago, and you're probably the only people who will get how cool this is. It was over the weekend, and I'm sat there cooking, like you do. He's on the DS, stuck on a particular level of Mario and Luigi, partners in time. You know, he's 6 years old. Dad, can you help me with this level? I'm sorry, John, I'm really busy. I'll be with you in 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes later, I go, and he's gone. He's disappeared. John, where are you? I'm in here, Dad. I'm on the computer. I'm just downloading a walkthrough. And as a parent, let me tell you, my wife remembers like his first words, the first time he walked, right? I got a little tear in my eye. He's just downloaded his first walkthrough. Oh God, this is brilliant. Because this is the world I want, right? Here's a kid who's 6, who's learning to use technology to help him do things in the world, to help him make a better experience, to help get past the level 6 boss or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But he's using technology to augment it, to help him extend way beyond what he could normally reach. This is the important skills, right? These are the important skills, not how to code using a particular package, but the mechanics of coding, the mechanics of development, the principles of development. These are important things. Because it also helps with other experiments. You have to be able to spot authenticity on the internet. I had to explain this to a bunch of primary and secondary schools who sort of knew who John Lennon was, but yeah, think about your audience. So for people like me, it means about letting go. It's mean having a confidence in how people are going to use technology, that they're going to do cool stuff with it, right? So don't get in their way, help them do it. It's also about empowering people. So we talked about games a lot today. We talked about using data. Actually, everything we do should be about helping other people do stuff. And it might be have a good time. It might be get better at a particular task in an organization. It might be making the world a better place. Our job as a byproduct of everything we do has to be how do we put people in a position to be better. If you like, it's kind of the principle why Microsoft has existed. Our stuff isn't about the products in themselves, you know, it's not about, oh, you know, another operating system, woohoo! It's about the cool shit you can do with it. That's the important bit for us. It's about empowerment. And then there's this thing when it comes to privacy, and again, when you deal with data, especially in the games that you develop, you've got to think about privacy. You've got to think about the aspects of you holding people's personal data. The best way to do that is to be transparent. This is what we hold on you, this is what we do with it, you have a choice, right? You have the law of 2 feet. You don't like it, you don't want to use it in that way, you can walk away. But be transparent. Don't obfuscate it, don't hide it, don't make it hard to read, don't make it, you know, impossible so people can't figure it out. Be upfront about what you're doing. And then finally, and this is something you guys, it's just built in to your industry, is we talk a lot, you know, in our world about engagement, or the consumers engage, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about engagement. What I really care about is enchantment. I want to make sure that every single person I talk to walks away thinking, bloody hell, God, think of the things I could do. Or technology is really cool. Or that bloke's a bit weird. Whatever it is, that's okay. I want them to feel enchanted by the experience. I think we all as individuals and for the companies that we work for, we have an opportunity to bring that enchantment to every single thing that we do. It's a bit like, and some of you will get this, some of you won't, the John Lewis advert at Christmas, the one that just went out. Right? So if you were a parent, you'll be like me, you'll be like, oh man, this is brilliant. Do you remember the John Lewis advert, little kid? No, some of you do. Brilliant. Anyway, the point about the advert never mentions what you can buy from John Lewis, doesn't tell you where the stores are, doesn't tell you what's going to be hot this Christmas. It just connects you to this raw emotion of kids at Christmas doing stuff for their parents. And that was enchanting. People just got hooked on that. You can do that with your games. You can do that in conversation. Whatever it is that you do, try and get to that level with people. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a long day for all of you. I really appreciate you sticking through to the end. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
That was great. So, some questions from the audience today. Nobody's got anything to say?
Yeah, hang on. Free beer and wine, or questions for the long-haired beardy bloke from Microsoft?
Yeah. He's got a question. He must have a question. No, I'll have a question. Okay.
When will the certificate be released?
10 years. No, I'm told, well, you know what, I don't know for the UK, but I know we're going to start seeing availability as early as October for the RT device, not for the Intel device. But, you know, think about it. It's Americans and what they call the holiday season, so they'll be ramping up. If we miss this Christmas, that would be a bad thing.
Another question?
Just a quick one. How long have you been presenting and doing the talks for?
It's my first time. For a day job, for the last 2 years, it's been my day job, but I did 20 years, basically. Well, I love it, right?
Everybody seems a bit dumb for answering. I thought you had a question. Yeah, I mean, basically, Dave is clearly passionate about technology. Hopefully he has conveyed that to you. Hopefully he has challenged some of your preconceptions and maybe changed your own thinking about technology and how you might interact with it yourselves. Question.
You seem to be quite an advocate of contextual data. As game developers, it's very easy to have an idea and go from start to finish without even considering any kind of use of that data. How could you, I know it's not your field of expertise, but how would you go about including that kind of data into?
So the first place I'd go is to work a bit of what you were saying, Aaron. I would go to the places you would never expect to find games. And I would look at the data that's available and gamify some experiences. So for example, what if you went to the NHS and said, I could build a game based on the health levels of every canteen in every hospital in the country, right? So that data's all publicly available. And think what you could do to gamify that. I mean, you could do some really scary stuff. So you could correlate the bouts of botulism and dysentery with the 5-star rating of those canteens. Again, you know, all of those things become available. This would be a world that you would never think of, but actually, in the public sector, people are dying, literally, and people are really trying to change people's behavior. And actually accessing that data and doing something really fun and interesting in a way that only you can. You know, you don't want a bunch of, you know, ex-IT people like me thinking, oh, I know, let's write a game. We'll call it gamification. It'll be brilliant. No, it won't. It will be shit, right? I need you guys to create a really good game experience based on that kind of data. So for me, I would try and do some public good. I would look for those data sources and see what you could do, and then go and find either a public sector or a private sector company like Aaron did with Craft and sell them something, show them something that could be done using this data. But look and see what data is available. There are some incredible data sets available from the weather through to trains, weather and trains, how exciting. Trust me, it's great. But all that stuff exists. So, you know, look and think what you can do.
Sort of. I missed a little bit, so I'm not sure if this was covered. But talking about data sets and searching through and making them available, is there a point where a search engine should become just the database of knowledge of everything rather than just pointing to it, in the sense that you say this data is available freely? What if that data suddenly disappears? What if the format changes? Format issues are the big ones. So we already have that in terms of caches and stuff like, and wayback machines and things like that. But what about the central database of all data sets to rule them all?
It's a really dangerous place to be for a search engine proposition, but there's a middle ground. The place that I would like to get to is, I think search engine homepages, frankly, are stupid. Right, so here I am trying to do something, and before I can do that, I've got to go all the way over to this bloody search engine thing, find out the information, and come back and get on with doing what I'm doing. What I really want is an API that I can call that gives me all of the goodness of search engine, but keeps me within the context of what I'm doing. And I think when search, you know, and that's the kind of direction that search, we think search is going. When that happens, you kind of get there. You're still at the beck and call as whether the data source is available or not. But to make search engine, we have this debate all the time as an industry. You know, the government in particular wants us to be responsible for everything that gets published on the web. That's really bad. That's really hard. I have people come to me from the government and they will say to me things like, Dave, we don't think people should be able to find religious extremist content using search. Okay, that's brilliant. So how would you like to do that? Well, why don't you go through your index and you mark all of the things that you think are extremist? Well, okay, so I'm a white guy from the Midlands, you know. My definition of extreme is probably going to be different to someone who's Muslim from another part of the country. So how are you going to do that? You can't make the search engines editorially responsible for the content. And I think the minute that you do, you end up, you know, look at what's happening to Google now. And I think I've got a lot of respect for Google as an organization, but they're having a hard time right now because they change the rankings depending on their editorial feel. So if they don't want this thing to come up a lot, they want to push it down. That's what they're being accused of in the EU. That's a really bad place for us to go. At least when you come to Bing, you may think that we were different to Google or not as good or wherever, but actually we're pretty transparent. This is the algorithm, this is how it works, and you know what you're getting into. And I think it's that transparency that makes it work and not the control, and that's what's important.
Okay. I think we probably need to break there. I said we're running into just over half an hour late because we did have the presentation, so we've got that half an hour to play with. But there is a reception in the Ruskin Gallery, starting sort of pretty much immediately. So really, all I need to do now is to thank Dave Coughlin once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All the other speakers, we've got Aaron, Will, and Jim left, and all the other speakers who were here before who have now gone. So thank you, speakers. To thank the sponsors of this event, and they are the Cambridge Five. That's Jagex and Sony Studios and Frontier and Ninja Theory and Geomerics. So thank you to sponsors. to Claire Denham. Front represents all the creative industries in Cambridge and is doing a fantastic job of pulling together different creative ideas and trying to get people just thinking about stuff. I mean, hopefully we've managed to do that today, and hopefully we can now go and continue that discussion in art. Okay, thank you for being very well. Thank you very much.